and keep your family safe. Fortunately for us, we can recognize that we're at the precipice, a point in history where we can all see the cycle changing. Where we go from here is up to us. So let's start the conversation, and welcome to the show.
And welcome to the show over the thundering lightning outside. Appreciate you joining tonight. Whoa, I don't even know where to start. Dog's terrified under the desk. The electrical storms are getting so much more intense, as would be expected with the jet streams going out of flow. Magnetic field on our planet has declined yet again. Now we're into the economic mix-up and the stoppage of goods pretty much across the planet. So you have to ask yourself, is this all related at this time? Now, everybody is focused on the economy right this second. Should we stop for a minute and just take a deep breath and be focused on the beautiful blue planet we live on? What we're seeing in our mind is nothing more than a tapestry woven by controllers to try to get you to put out these emotions that are feeding them. This fear, this chaos, this unknown. Those are emotions that these entities feed on. They're feeding off of us as a construct through this planet. It doesn't matter which nation you're in right now. Some sort of frequency pattern has been put over humanity that is triggering some sort of stimulus. And I can absolutely feel there's something here feeding on us. Hard to describe what that is, but have you felt the shift? Seems like there's been a shift. The energy seems more scattered. You can almost feel that vibrational pattern has changed in the last couple of weeks. And since all eyes are on the economy, you really have to wonder, since Amazon is stopping all deliveries from China right today, if that's the big news, if you haven't heard it, well, welcome to the new world that we're going to exist in. But remember, there's always a positive. There's always a way to find something and maneuver through this. So as I was talking to somebody else earlier today, when this shut off begins of Amazon product right now, there's going to be an enormous amount of people that had survived COVID in the small business arena that will face more difficulties. But we as Americans generally have bought so much stuff that houses are packed full of stuff. You need a storage shed to fill all the stuff. This is going to be a chance to possibly recycle and be able to use and sell and barter and trade with others who need what you have. Now, if Amazon gets cut off, yeah, those are the tornado warnings, severe thunderstorms, giant golf ball size, larger, even approaching apple-sized hail coming down through Atlanta. Warning, extreme warning. You have about 30 minutes before that monster hail starts ripping through Atlanta and metro Atlanta. We're at the very edge of that up here in East Tennessee, but that warning system coming out was just box after box of red warnings coming down toward Atlanta. Ryan Maue putting out some big warnings there over on X as well, at Ryan Maue. Like, these are the things that are coming out. The ferocity of the storms can no longer be ignored. The crop losses and delayed plantings and floodings and just absolute chaos in the agricultural production system across the planet can no longer be ignored. It can't be. So, the chance of all this economic strangeness overlaying on top of what is going to be the first year of absolute devastating crop losses. You can't tell me there's not related when a known inbound cycle was coming. Now, guaranteed, it's totally baked in they've already guaranteed that we have stepped off solar maximum, heading into solar minimum 2 years early. So as we do the waning magnetic field, there's going to be just more galactic cosmic rays, more rainfall, just more strangest, more electrified skies, more electrified storms. And this all plays right into what we're seeing with the change of our society. Actually, Trump summed it up quite well, the change of an age. We're at that time. So, all these things dovetail and overlap. And tonight with me, Ransom Godwin holding down the other end of the fort, the digital side, bringing us the imagery tonight. And we got a bunch of graphs. And yo, what up, Ransom? I'm wondering what you're hearing across the airwaves. I know obviously we follow some of the same media, but The Bitcoin resistance levels bouncing. They're looking at 208,000 off the next ping off this one here, off the tariffs. So I don't know where you see what you see. Anybody seen Sasquatch in the forest lately? If you're out there, not a lot of leaves. You can still see through pretty deeply into the forest. Anybody peeking around the trees at you? Welcome.
I don't know. They have we have skinwalkers. We don't have we have skinwalkers in New Mexico, so they could be a Bigfoot if they want to be. But you know, I've been trying to literally stay away from media this week and get like work done in real life and see how I could ignore like everything and just be in my own little world. And I can't because
I know you can't. We
I
try,
live.
but it's impossible now.
I
Literally
went to
impossible.
I went to Home Depot and I heard people talking about tariffs in the aisles. This is, you know how like you always hear these stupid stories about, one of the drama topics. I won't get into those, but the heart pulling strings, or the strings pulling of the heart there, that a lot of people pay attention to. I don't get much into that, but they make up these stories about hearing people talking about it, and you're like, yeah, right, that didn't happen. But I literally heard people talking about tariffs because they were wondering if they were still going to get some of this particle board um, that they use a lot, and it comes from I think Indonesia or China is what the guy was saying. But they were worried like how much that was going to go up, or the lumber and everything, because Home Depot may get their wood from certain places. I don't know. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but most of the tools, products, and all that stuff, it's all coming from China. So it's ironic that you sent me this slide about Amazon because, every once in a while I buy stuff from Amazon. But I was just thinking about that today or yesterday when I overheard the 105% tariff on China, and I think it's going up because so. And then the other thing is we're trying to get supplies and come back and fix stuff. And then when I get here, I hear jets. I hear jets all day, all night. F-16s doing practice sorties out here, and then you think it's gonna shut off about 9 o'clock like it usually does. But living in this valley since I was a kid, every time we're about to do a major military operation, all day, 24 hours, jets, 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 because they're practicing at night, they're practicing in the daytime, and where I live is real similar to certain areas. It's not like Ukraine here. It's not like China here. It's like the Middle East here. So it's a perfect place. So I'm betting that the economic, shock and wonder and people worrying about things going up and going down is all going to disappear in a few weeks when we start bombing and bombing and bombing. And you could guess which one that is because it's been like a 20-year buildup to take that last country of the seven that they wanted to topple and destabilize. So we're there. It's just a matter of time of when they do that. And I know
Ransom, is
that
that Dingleberry hair pie? Is that the country they're going after?
I'm pretty sure it's Iran.
Oh, I thought it was Dingleberry hair pie. Okay, I'm just curious. I got
But
to write that
anyway,
down.
you
I
know
got the
what?
misspelling on that one.
That's kind of inevitable. But I was also looking at the ups and downs myself of the stock market, and through the news, we're on economic Armageddon already, and nothing's even happened yet. And the way everybody's talking is like, oh, we're done. But then it all came back up, right? And then it went back down again. So there you get to see in real time another giant transformation of wealth where a bunch of people pocketed billions just in the last week because they knew what was going to go up, they knew what was going to go down, and they knew what would rebound in just a few days. So, now you're seeing articles about insider trading and all this because it's magical wealth transformation, but it's not magical. It's odds and artificial intelligence running what to buy and what to sell, when to do it. And so people are freaked out, and it does look criminal, and maybe it is from, like a karma standpoint, but people with real power now have access to systems that far and away take you away from any insight or investment you're going to figure out by watching that boob tube. You're just not going to do it. You're looking at information that's probably 6-7 months old when it comes to financial stuff. The only thing that they give you that's new is that magical number that people are watching, up, down. But yeah, you sent this slide over here. Let me look at it again. Right here. Top 20 cities by number of Amazon sellers. So if you don't have your orders in for all of the trinkets, basically disposable income products, because that's the majority of what people are buying from China, all that Tamu stuff, really cool things. But if you really think about it, those are all things that you get in a bored, understimulated society. There's so much comfort here right now, despite what you think's going on. There's so much comfort in the United States and some of the other Western world that they have time to shop for things that they don't need, that doesn't do anything, that'll fall apart. It's all disposable income, and there's literally probably billions of people out there right now just handing their future, their children's future, and their grandchildren's future away, just buying nothing. They're not buying land. They're not buying tools. They're not buying, farming equipment, except for the people that do that, obviously. But you have all of these other people they just don't get it, that things can change on a dime, and that's what we're seeing, right? New wealth is being built, and other wealth is just going to disappear. But this age of buying cheap junk that's useless, we don't need it. It's not a necessity. So I don't feel like over here in the U.S. that me personally am going to hurt that bad, no matter what, pans out with the stock market or whatever. I'm just, I'm thinking right now it's just seeds in the ground and having extra food just in case things get thin, and just riding right through the emergency of the world, because I'm just living like a normal human being has probably for the last 1,000 years, with a slightly technological twist where I get to look at all this stuff happening. We might have got cut off from Dubai. Anyway, yeah, this is cool. Let me turn this off. And I was going to skip through the headlines for you guys and show you this. That's all they're showing on the news right now. It's just a bunch of economic chaos. Well, except for, the storm right here.
Oh, well, that's how long it took me to get the Starlink back up and running here again. So if you're
fast.
wondering like where I went, boom, our internet just cut off at the edge of the storm. So thunder and lightning outside, little storms here, and at least the power hasn't gone out. Cross fingers, but I got the generator ready and Starlink's up and running. So it takes about that long to convert over to get that unit up and plugged in, because there's a little delay because we don't leave it on all the time unless we really need it. So by the time it connects and goes back and gets a signal and pulls back, you're about 3 minutes in.
That was fast.
Yeah. Now I was going somewhere and I forgot what you were talking, and this whole thing of, yeah, I was going to say, I thought I'd sent you a picture here of the last 3 times that when you were talking about, I had a graphic that the last 3 times that it had happened like this, where the market had swung 5% up, 5% down or more, 6, 7, whatever, was 1997, 2008, and 2020. So those dates are significant for those of you who trade stocks or you knew. Yeah, here you go. So Ransom, I just sent you that thing. Oh, I'm sorry, 1987, not 1990. 1987, which is the largest crash. 2008, which was the next one that ushered in the panic of the financial crisis. In 2020, right at COVID. So the only three times that they have this where it swung more than 5% in the last 50 years was those three dates. Up and down. We're talking an up and down round trip. So Morning Brew, they send out, just a quick one paragraph or so. This is their newsletter for the morning here. So credit where credit's due on that. They were an advertiser of mine back in the day, so I still do sign up for the newsletter. But notice, if this is anything to portend, what you were talking about, Ransom, in 2 weeks from now, if they were to do something in Iran, the price of oil would spike. Now, nobody's looking at oil because it went below 60 for a minute there. So what I'm really looking at is all the signaling that's going on. It's the signal that the change is here and is planned to continue to some new morphing of it. So each individual event by itself is nothing to be afraid of as its own. But once you start to wind them together, it's not to even be fearful of that. It's to show you that it's a signal that something else is beginning. Now, you can take that any way you like. The end of one thing and the beginning of another, that's just called a chapter in the book of history or life or whatever it is. We've all been through that where you absolutely know the door closed behind you and you're into a different room or down a different hallway of life. That is life. But we're looking at the same thing here. In terms of a civilization, we have just closed the door and we have opened another, and we're entering a new chapter in human history here. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I am saying it's absolutely known cycle on the magnetic field changes that now humanity needs to be distracted and bent and moved in a certain direction. Some say for survival, others say for manipulation, and others say to be milked of the wealth all the way down to the ground, and whoever is left, good luck on the next iteration. Will give you 1 penny on the dollar and reset your currency, and here we go again. Hey, start claw your way back up. So whatever way you look at it, if you know this is coming, like, how do you prepare yourself? So what about the solutions then? All right, so we know things are getting cut off from Amazon. That's going to be a terrifying one for many, because most people order from, like, if you look at traditional brick and mortar stores, they're just a fraction. So what would you buy now? I'd be going to every estate sale I could right now and getting bedding, for sure tools. Everybody's got probably enough dishes to last for 50 years in their house. But what else would you get? That's the question.
I could tell you don't have a teenager that washes your dishes. We've bought so many, of that kind of stuff in the last couple of years, and it's only because of teenager hands. But yes, normally that stuff lasts forever. No, I'm just kidding about that. But yeah, you're right. People need to be investing in down to earth things right now. Like that's all I'm going to be doing all summer is concentrating on extra food. I want to eat, and really the last couple years, but I've had some, failures. I've discovered some things like basically once I use my soil here, it's gone. The next year it's too dried out. It's too the wind has blown all the good parts out of it. And last year too, it flooded really bad here. I don't remember if you I don't know if you remember seeing on the news Roswell, which is the next city over, this summer was completely flooded out. It looked like some of the same scenes from Hurricane Helene, but this is just out in the desert, and people's houses were floating away. Main Street was a river, and I had a little small scale idea of what would happen if we had more rain here like they did in Roswell, because I found out my property became the lowest property when it flooded, because they've done a bunch of commercial real estate construction and stuff in the area, so the water's changed, and it made a river right through my yard. My yard was the one that was draining out. So it was, a little sad to see all of the soil that I have built up and paid for the last couple of years because I live in the desert. I have to purchase soil to have anything grow good, but it all floated away in one day. It was already eroded, but that was wind erosion, and you could kind of put new soil on it and reuse it, but not if it just floats away and you're back down to the red sand clay and you have to start all over again. So this year we're concentrating on, fixing little things like that, anticipating problems so that you don't have to deal with things like other people. And that's just really a good idea for everybody to start doing right now. Find out how easy it is to fix things and do things yourself, basically. We all need to become Renaissance men, so to speak, where we know the disciplines of a lot of things. I always worry about stuff when I have a project. Like, I feel dumb before I do it. And then by the time I'm actually working, I remember, oh yeah, I know how to do all this, and it's real easy to slap together. So I think that's why a lot of people kind of, fear doing things themselves. But the more of you do of it, the less mistakes you're going to make, and you're going to be 100% ahead of everyone else in thinking. Just thinking about how to fix things, what you're going to do if what happens, like if there was a food shortage problem and a supply chain issue, I know that I'm particularly vulnerable in the city I live in because we're 2 days from everything already. So I can't get an overnight piece of mail here. That's impossible. I can get 2 days here. And they estimate, that the grocery stores have about 3 days without new shipments before they run out. So that means I would be alone with 60,000-ish people in a bone dry valley with no options for food. And if it was something like a grid failure, then we're really screwed because the people in the desert depend on electricity to have water. So, like you might live in Tennessee and think, well, I'll just go down and, use a water straw and drink some of the water that's all over the place. We don't have that option. There's, you could drill and get to an artesian well, or make an artesian well and get down to the aquifer. That's a lot of manpower, and you're not doing it without equipment, permits. It's a big expense. So poor people aren't doing that. That means you got 60,000 people to compete with for a drop of water, a bite of food, and that's scary. But it can happen. I mean, we keep seeing it happen over and over. Natural disasters, and these are all probably somewhat preventable with some kind of preparation, but that's something we've lost in the past 20 years.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're down in a 50,000-foot crevice getting your water down there.
5,000-foot crevice.
50,000-foot crevice.
No, think about this.
Bill Murray with that one. Caddyshack, and the 50,000-foot crevice.
Right.
But we got somebody bought us 3 double espressos. Someone, thank you, BB, right on the money there. Thank you. And Ransom, I was going to ask you, bamboo. Would bamboo grow out in your area? Because I'll tell you a story. When I was up in Pai, in Thailand, North Thailand, and I was working on an organic thing up there. This guy Willow passed away a few years back. Had an organic farm going up there, and they had one area they were growing coffee, and they had massive floods, like a dam broke and all kind of just insane. It was a remnant of a tropical hurricane came over Vietnam, and then it went over Laos, and then it dumped right over North Thailand up there. The dams broke, just insane flooding. But you know what? Wherever there was bamboo along the riverside, it actually caught what you're talking about, built up a mud thing, and all the debris went around it. Nothing got washed away behind the bamboo wall. And another thing, my wind chimes are banging out here, and we put them up in a certain spot where only from the south wind, when it gets real heavy and you're going to get blasted with a big amount of rain and stuff, these wind chimes are jingling out there. So like setting up natural, even if I didn't have if there was no power in anything here, if we hear those wind chimes, we know you need to batten down something, because the way that system's coming in, anytime it can get those wind chimes to ring off, that's some heavy wind from the wrong direction. So it's all these little things, that you might want to consider. And speaking of your soil, I watched Danny up at Deep South Homestead. He lives in Mississippi, and he did some soil testing himself out there where they were putting in a new orchard. He's taken away some old garden area where he used to plant sweet potatoes, and he's rotating it out, and he's putting up a peach orchard out there. But he was saying nitrogen disappears every single year. Even though he does a lot of fertilization and that sort of thing, his nitrogen disappeared. He was shocked how low the nitrogen went, because I just put a whole bunch out there last year. So he was saying with the new UV, with the other changes solar activity wise, that the interaction of UV and nitrogen in the soil, we are going to be consistently undernourished with nitrogen. That you need to, as a number one thing, consider more nitrogen application, because it seems to be disappearing rapidly, far more rapidly than ever before, in terms of the interaction here with the baking sunlight. And I can attest to that. We were out yesterday and the day before, because I was pruning my orchard out here yesterday, and it was scalding. It's early April, and I really felt like I was in a microwave oven, and that sunlight was incredibly intense yesterday. But if you're all out there and you're thinking, Ransom's telling you something, another thing as well, Danny down in Mississippi saying something's different. And up here, the sunlight is just absolutely off the Richter, like cooking. So think about that in the Southeast U.S. all the way out to the Southwest and desert areas here. Like, there's significant noticeable differences. So if we're all noticing it, what do you think the big ag people are going through right now? Although I did drive through a bunch of fields of winter wheat today, and they all looked really good, I'll say that. But again, plentiful rainfall, East Tennessee, it's that perfect time of year. That winter wheat harvest is going to be real good out here. But other than that, because I was just curious, Ransom, if you can grow bamboo in the desert, like once it takes hold and those roots get down real deep, are they able to self-water? And because putting bamboo around your property would actually stop that or gather more dirt around after those kind of flood events. Just food for thought.
Well, I happened to just plant bamboo like 2 weeks ago. I put it all in the sand that's along my fence there. I had a bunch of seeds that somebody gave me. And yeah, exactly that. What's funny is the sludge that kind of built up that got delivered here from somewhere else. I had to, re-dig that out to level my gate so I could even open it, and there was massive amount of weeds and plant life that grew in that. And that's exactly what you're talking about. If you can just keep the water where it actually deposits soil because of the plants, then you get a buildup there. Yeah, that's a trip. I did. I'm having to reinvent how to grow everything here, because I've learned a few things. The problem here is with the flooding is you could live here for probably, 2,000 years and nothing will happen. But if a monsoon storm hits this mountain right next to me, that's a 5,000-foot drop that just drains right in the valley where all of the occupation, yeah, that's right. Occupation of humans, anyway. That's where all the people live. And they keep redesigning, and it seems like the engineers don't understand desert flooding, because the desert makes the seal on the top of the soil, and when the water comes, it just can't absorb into the soil. So it just races across it and takes everything on top with it. So it's a really dangerous situation if, we get one of those events of 20 inches of rain or something right on the mountain. And that's actually what happened, ironically, to Ruidoso, that's right up the mountain from me. They had a bad wildfire. It burned up all the brush. They started cleaning up. Then they got a massive rain event that flooded everybody out and messed it. So it was like one big emergency right after another one. And they're still rebuilding that town right now. Like, they're literally having to fill in these 20-foot gashes in the ground that just washed all of the soil down to the bedrock. Totally redesigning their town. And, just a 2-day event.
Where would you look for the gold runoff then, if something like that large of an event were to occur? Obviously, gold is in that area. So, were people down trying to pan out where those like huge washes down at the bedrock were? I'm curious because,
Yeah, not that I know
People
of.
chasing gold these days everywhere because it's becoming more valuable. So even what was non-profitable, or you wouldn't even think about it before, but if you're getting massive floods washing out gold, known gold deposit areas to bedrock, I mean, where would that deposit down the stream where it was flowing to?
It would be in the city arroyos. If you go down to the end of the canals that they make, this is actually where I used to get the sand for underneath the garden. And you can just go steal the sand or whatever. But the problem with it's got a lot of microplastics. But yeah, I don't see why you couldn't do that. That's the end little mud pit. That's where you would go. That's where it all washes to. I never
'Cause
seen
there's,
anybody out there panning though.
you never do, huh?
No, I bet no one's thought of that. And if they did, they're not telling nobody.
Yeah, keep your if you find those little secret spots, everybody, keep it quiet. Don't be broadcasting here on YouTube that you got that. Because the moving forward, there's going to be some new opportunities, but unless things change back incredibly fast, like the damage that'll be done already here is maybe it's not damage. Again, like you look at a forest fire, okay, it's damaging. But then, the following subsequent years, plural, there's just an enormous amount of new life that flourishes there. From the flower to the vegetation to the bird species that come back, the insect species, that sort of thing, they just come back. And, fire does also, ignite some seeds to come out of their hibernation. No pun intended on the ignite, but generally, there's different types of seed. Like, I was talking about the winter wheat. It has to go through a certain number of freeze days sitting in the soil before it emerges in the spring. Well, same thing with fire. There's a fair species of, pines out there where those seeds in the pine cones, they won't germinate until they go through a fire.
Yeah, they have
and,
to.
It's cleansing for a lot of areas, but we look at it as destructive. Really, it's just burning out the bottom undergrowth and allowing air, oxygen, sunlight to come and nourish something else. Now, if we step over into the global economic sphere of that, we've been smothered by underbrush and taxes and regulation and corruption for 100 and some years here since 1913, before that even. But, if you take a look, Ransom, I'd sent you a slide with 3 different presidents going back at 100-year intervals when they did tariffs. And the whole point was they need to wait about 100 years so 3 generations forget what happened. Yeah, right there you go. So think about that for just a moment here. 1828, 1930, and 2025. The same thing with the different pandemics that had come through. You're telling me that 100-year interval that we got the Spanish flu 100 years ago, and prior to that, two intervals back, we get the Black Death. It's like every 100 years, something's coming through. It's like these 2 things seem rather coordinated to myself here on these 100-year intervals. Now, I'm not saying that the Spanish flu overlapped with the 1930 and the 28 crash, but it's really interesting how these plagues also on our planet are nearly at 100-year intervals. Tariff collapse, restructuring at nearly 100-year intervals. So what is it about that 3rd generation waiting period so everybody forgets before it happens again? Something seems amiss here. It does seem cleansing that we're getting through a lot of, shall we say, overburden that should be burned away, that's getting burnt away at the moment. But again, for those animals that are in the fire at the moment, they're trying to flee and get out of the way of the danger. Only the subsequent years do they come back when there's green, supple, vegetation growing and it's safe again. Fire's been extinguished, things are growing, there's tree canopy, flourishing food source, but that takes a year or 2. But I think we're right in the middle of the forest fire time right now. And then we're going to blaze out of here. We got to get out of the way for a minute and then come back in. But it's going to be absolutely mind altering to find the opportunities. There will be many, believe me, there will be many, 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 many opportunities during this time. But how do you identify those and sort of dive into the niche? Because I was talking to the guy who helped me do the orchard yesterday, and he doesn't really have much TV either. And he was asking me, what do you think? And I told him, I think we're going to go back to sort of a bartering and trading, like empty the closet, kind of move through, you wouldn't even say yard sales, but like community sales of things. And he goes, oh man, I live in that world. And I was like, dude, you are going to dominate then. If that's your waking state already and you're existing in this commerce world and that underlayer of barter and commerce already, you're absolutely going to be the king, man, of knowing how to do that when nobody else does. See, now we're going to flip the script here. Everybody knows how to use paper dollars and go buy something new in a store. That's like child's play. Now take something that's been used and give it value again, and then find a price that somebody will agree on and then give it to you in a different thing, not using money. It could be using food. It could be using labor. It could be using something else. But those people that exist in that world already as their waking state, just like I saw this movie where a disease swept through the air and made everybody go blind. But the people who were already blind, they were the kings inside, because they already knew how to exist in any, thrive in that environment anyway. So everybody else came in brandly new, blind, and stumbling around, banging into stuff, couldn't even make it to the bathroom or anything. But these people who had lived in that world absolutely dominated. So I'm looking at it the same way. If you're anyway and you have skills for bartering, trading, assessing value, sewing something back together, revamping something, consolidating that for sale at a different place, absolutely that's a winning strategy moving forward. I hate to use the word Great Depression-esque, but I think that supply chains are being ripped apart on purpose to bring us to a regional sort of existence anyway, and there's no way around that. That's just the way the Lima Doctrine, or the Lima Declaration, from 1974 to 76, when they set up the protocols to move us from that period of time up to today to deindustrialize the Western nations, and then bring us to this, what we have today, to spread out the wealth, to spread out the technology across all the less developed nations of that time in the late 1960s, early 70s, early 80s, to try to spread that across the entire planet, to have them self-develop at least to a certain point. Now this has run its course. Now the next 2025 to 2050 is about deindustrialization. Everything's going to be 3D printed. What you consider bringing factories back to America, the automation there is going to be 3D printing and using AI. The people that will be in there will be the ones who either program the automation and robotics, or they'll be the ones that are servicing, or they'll be the ones that are, making sure the raw product is in place, that the manufacturing can take place. There'll be no humans inside there. And we're going to come back to regionalization again. We're definitely stepping away from anything on the global level. So this is the terror part right now. We're in the beginning of the reformation of it. Because if you lived in the 1970s into the early 80s, you saw the beginning of, NAFTA, and you saw the beginning of this moving things to cheaper places like Mexico, and then suddenly jumped over to China in the early 90s, and you heard some inklings of stuff in Indonesia and China. You saw that movement slowly, and bam, like Andy Scheckman always says, slowly, 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 and then all at once. Little by little, and then all at once. Well, that was the same thing that we saw. It was like little by little in the mid-90s, and then boom, everything was in China by 2000, 2005. Man, there was nothing left. That stuff even got hoovered over there from Mexico. It all got sucked over to Asia. And this is the same thing. It's like little by little, and all at once is beginning to happen. It's going to shift, rift, break, crack, and get smashed into 1,000 pieces. So where's your opportunity in that? That's the whole thing. Don't look at it as something bad happening. Look at it as a reformation and a possibility to reinvent yourself. So where do you find the value in that, Ransom? Like, walk me through that world here. I'm all ears.
That was funny. I was just watching that Ross Perot speech about, why wouldn't we build stuff other places if I have to pay health care and, life insurance and all this other stuff to just make a product? I'll just go to Mexico. That's that giant sucking sound. Remember that? He was talking about that. Yeah, that made me think of that a lot.
Yeah, I remember there's a lot of wisdom in a few of the outliers that are, there was some such wisdom in the people who are outside the political circle that really wanted economic change.
Oops. Sorry, I messed up all my buttons. No, I was just thinking that despite, like we were talking with Nyquist kind of about, I'm a little different on the opinion that I don't think we need more than we want workers from all over the world. I think that there's been, he was right in one way where he was talking about everybody becoming soft generationally. And, like you have the great generation, then they have the boomers, then they have Gen X, and Gen X, learned a bunch of stuff from the great generation because that's their grandparents. Unfortunately for the millennials, the boomers were their grandparents, and the boomers really had everything handed to them. Their parents worked to the bone. They fought a world war. They lived through, massive hard times with the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl. All of that stuff was in their childhoods and them growing up. So they didn't complain about nothing. They just, as they say, pulled themselves up by the bootstrap and just accomplished everything. They painted their house. They fixed it if they need carpentry. They knew how to do stonemasonry. They knew how to work on their car. They knew how to farm their land. They knew how to work on the tractor. They knew how to invent stuff. I mean, a lot of the inventions that we enjoy later came out of that generation as well. And, now all of that's gone. Unfortunately, it's sad. Mama, Papa, Peepaw, and all of that stuff have left the world. And thank God that they gave a lot of that information to some people. So unfortunately for the youth, there is an opportunity. And I say unfortunately because, that means they have to get out of the house, get out of the air conditioning, stop playing the video games, stop looking at the social media, stop watching porn, stop doing all of these destructive, time-consuming things that were just given to them as children. And now they're adults and they are soft. They don't know what it's like to sit out in the blistering sun. Now, some poor people do. And yes, those immigrants do because they came from their country where they were still doing it. And then they come over here and what happens? Everybody whines because they're the guy getting $20, $30 an hour to create, fix, and build stuff. Now, I say unfortunately because they're going to have to get rid of that soft lifestyle and learn a trade, learn 2 trades, learn 3 trades. Teach your children those trades. You can take back the workforce in a really small amount of time, less than a decade. I think that we could recover from, any loss of workers and be the main workforce again. It's just people are going to have to get over that soft lifestyle and realize that to be able to have something, you have to make it. And to make it, you have to spend the time doing it and learning how to do it. The problem is the corporations have been working against this idea for some time, and they still are. And I know that their end result game plan is to replace that workforce, at least with all the tedious factory jobs, fast food jobs, really low skilled jobs that are monotonous, all going to be robot. But it's not going to be able to fix the drain in your sink. It's not going to be able to, fix your house and do things that we do that we still know how to do. That's way far off. Now, killing machines, transportation, and things like that, they're there. They're there so much more that you have the president, I don't know, maybe you could say it's a bluff, but think about what we were talking about with Nyquist last week, where he brought up, unless we're sandbagging, and then you have other analysts out there saying, no, we have good stuff. We've saved it back. And it does make sense because if you realize our weapon sales over the past 30 years from the 90s to now, we sold everybody all the old stuff, all the, F4 Phantoms and the F-16s. They have that. That's all the old stuff. And even our stealth junk that we're, supposed to be top of the line stuff is old junk. So I kind of believe Trump when he says, we have weapons that no one even know how it works or seen it before. That tells me that they are prepared to fundamentally transform the reality of this planet. I think what they're doing is waiting for China to do something to become a boogeyman better than they are now, like to invade something, to do anything that we could use for an excuse to accelerate the future. And then, like you said, it'll all happen at once. All the factories will start up. All the wars will start. All of these new ideas will just be reality one day when you woke up, not like yesterday. And for Gen X, that's happened several times to us, so we know that it can happen again. Just you wake up one day and they tell you that the world's changed and it's not going back. 9/11 was one of those moments that everybody didn't even realize the gravity of what happened. No pun intended, with the free fall stuff going on. But there was a major transformation of wealth. There was a realignment of nations. There was plans to draw up new borders. And now we're at the end of that stage of the program, and we're getting to see what the next program is. And I have a feeling that it is the trilateral style world government. And I think all the players are participating in the grand final idea, but they're going to fight over who gets better circumstances in that new world. And I think that's what's going to happen. We're about to bomb a few countries, do some major trade reorganization. And this thing with China, we can cripple them. We don't need that crap. The stuff that we buy from them is just not really necessary. Everybody got sold on the comfort, softness of capitalism and being able to buy a product and have it delivered to their front door. And what happens to most of that Amazon stuff? It lasts for a year. You put it on a shelf, you resell it. I mean, it's not like we can't survive without trinkets. We can. And in fact, everybody has for millions of years up until now, where we've become the softest civilization to date. I mean, physically, mentally, and, as far as power of having individual property, wealth, and knowledge to back up our lifestyle.
Yeah, the old cement pond grandma kind of lifestyle from the Beverly Hillbillies, like the old timers. Even out here in East Tennessee, the old timers are really not as many as there used to be. You can tell they operate differently. If you can find a couple of the eldest, they'd be in their 90s by now out here, late 90s, early 90s, somewhere around there. They run on a different kind of machinery in their mind and body, because everybody was always moving and walking. They look at these blue zones where they live to be over 100 generally. One thing that was unanimous across all of them was continuous motion. The diet could vary from place to place, but one thing that was always unanimous was these people never stopped moving. They never became sedentary. They always kept. And so when you look and you find somebody who's 95 still cruising around, they were the ones who were out in the gardens. They never stopped moving. So, that's another key to longevity. Do not stop moving. You got to get out and keep moving around, walking, using your body every day, whatever it is, bending over. A lot of, planting gardens, even soft work like that, being out in the sun, doing any kind of work to keep that body moving up and down, side to side, walking, the legs, joints, this sort of thing. And it's crazy how many people have joint problems these days comparatively to the elders. I'm just wondering why more people today have many more joint problems than had been previously, because it just seems something is different. Whatever it is different, absolutely, in terms of the physiology and how hardy it could be, and the withstanding of things that would break other people. They're just like gingerly hopscotching through that, send others to tears in terms of what they would have to endure. Hey, if you're still planting the food and you don't have any way to plant, I don't care if it's still dark. You go out there and work with candles or whatever until the planting's done. You come in at 11 o'clock, you can't complain because you're still, and that's the way it used to be. Nobody stopped until the work was done. Like today, it's just 5, I'm already off. Or no, it's getting near sunset, I got to go in already. The whole mind frame of getting work done or not getting it done is going to change too. Because, there's two things here. You were talking about, like Taiwan's another one that is forced to buy, and I'll absolutely say that. They're forced to buy an enormous amount of outdated junk weapons in order to get the protection from the States. Everybody in Taiwan knows it, that they're getting old junk. But buying that old junk assures them some sort of, protection, quote unquote, because they're at that, that first chain of islands there. But China's in its own conundrum as well right now. So they're going to have only a couple of choices. And you've already seen one of them is to hyperinflate and just like print like crazy to stop their stock markets from falling over there. Because if the unemployment rolls through all those factory lines, you have to realize the amount of men that are there that will be unemployed with nothing, getting angry by the day, they have to redirect them. Hundreds of millions of them. Now, the way that they could, redirect that anger before, or that animosity, or even not being able to climb a ladder or afford a house, and a lot of the same issues we're experiencing here with the younger generation, is they kept giving them jobs in these giant factory zones and guaranteed them, like, you get free housing, you get free food in these areas, you make money every month, you can send it home to the family, and then everything works as it did before, because that's just part of the tradition. Men work, they send money home. Women work, they send money back to the family, to the elders in the family. So what happens when the factories start closing across China, but you have 100,000 people that work in a factory, or 50,000 or 20,000, doesn't matter. Where do all these people go and go to work? They don't. They were already having a demographic nightmare anyway for unemployment of even those with PhDs that would be working the equivalent in a restaurant or a McDonald's with a PhD. So saturated the job market, because their whole promise was the more you work, the more you study, the harder you work, the more courses you take, stacked to the Himalaya of like diploma things, and you still can't get a job. So that whole thing of teasing a generation to study to infinitum to get that higher job, that's gone. Everybody understands it. Master degree, you don't have a chance. You got to have a PhD to even be in the line that's 1,000 deep to be able to be considered. Or you go to work in a factory or some kind of very low level job, and people do that. They don't give up and quit and go, I'm not going to work. But now, where do you reshuffle all those people who've already taken that step backward, that the social contract was already broken at some point? The only thing is, in China, you just can't complain. You complain, you disappear. Because at the time, there was only a few complaining compared to the masses who were, employed everywhere. But now you're going to have this tidal wave of hundreds. I'm talking 100, 200 million unemployed at the same time, getting agitated. So China's in quite the conundrum. Their economy's in collapse. They had to pump the most money they've ever printed. They had to devalue their currency to the lowest ever, at least on the foreign exchange traded market, not the actual exchange rate in China. Because when I traveled there, and I was studying there in 2002, 2003, somewhere, it was like 7.8 renminbi to a dollar. Like the Forex float outside is somewhere around 7.6 now. So it never got really ultimately the lowest, where it was 7.8 when I was there way back, 20 plus years ago. But it's getting close. So they're devaluing their currency to make it cheaper, so people want to buy more stuff because it's cheaper. It doesn't cost as much. You can buy more of their junk for less price. They're enticing people by lowering the price of the goods by devaluing their currency. But at the same time, the central bank has just absolutely just turned the money printer on to like 1,000x and add extra grease into the cogs and let it run even faster. Full steam, some kind of like a Bugs Bunny, Wile E. Coyote kind of crazy, where the steam engine's pumping. It's almost gonna, like the bolts are coming across, every puff of the engine on the gears, and the sort of boom, boom, you can see it. That's just exactly what their money printers are like now. It can't even go a fifth of an eighth, hardly longer, before China's gonna absolutely implode in some way, economically. And when that happens, and those factories, like Amazon stopping all deliveries to America, absolutely just, I can't even believe it. Being in China would be very terrifying right now if you were a business owner or the government itself. They realize they just got cut off, and all those societal problems are going to sweep back. It's like a 10.0 earthquake happened offshore. And suddenly now that giant tsunami is coming back, and they can see it from the beach. That's what's happening right now. So to look into that society at the moment, they are backed into a corner pretty much. So at what point, how do they get out of it? Imagine the same thing were to happen to us over here. We're not nearly as reliant on factory production as they are. How do they find a way out of it? They got to redirect the boys elsewhere. And what are they going to do? Anyway, I know rambled into the break. Sorry, Ransom. We'll catch you on the beginning here. But anyway, civilization cycle.
There are few things you can count on in a major disaster. Having your water supply cut off is one of them. With the Alexa Pure Emergency Water Bank, you'll have months of drinking water in your home. Everyone else will stand in line waiting to get just a few bottles.
We'll be right back after this message.
It's one of the easiest, most affordable ways to store emergency water, and it takes up hardly any space. The Alexa Pure Emergency Water Bank includes 1 BPA-free liner, comes with a siphon pump for extracting water, provides easy-to-follow instructions, fits just about any bathtub, large or small, fills quickly in 30 minutes or less, holds up to 65 gallons of water, and keeps water fresh for up to 16 weeks, holds about 2 months of water for one person. A person can generally survive without water for about 3 days. However, the exact amount of time depends on many factors, including age, activity level, and overall health. Don't gamble with your life and well-being. Being prepared is easier than ever with Civilization Cycle and Alexa Pure.
Our Grid Doctor 3300 has been upgraded to include EMP Intercept technology. Our built-in Grid Doctor technology incorporates industrial-grade components to safely protect the Grid Doctor 3300 and keep it operating in those dangerous times. EMP Intercept technology has been designed to exceed U.S. military requirements for a high-altitude nuclear detonation that results in an electrical magnetic pulse. This protection also covers lightning strikes, grid surges, coronal mass ejections, solar flares, and phases E1, E2, and E3 of an electromagnetic pulse.
New York City in the early morning, after a night of no electric power, and so no lights, elevators, subway trains, or any trains, airports, air conditioning, traffic signals, television. What it did have in the dark streets was a wild outburst of crime. Arson, looting, mugging, and 1,000 false fire alarms.
Never get left out in the cold. There is never a reason to ever let you or your family suffer. Instafire and Civilization Cycle are on a mission to make fire starting and off-grid living easy for everyone. You shouldn't have to be a mountain man to strike a flame and make a fire anytime, anywhere.
Oh, they'll ban us for that song. That's what they do. Hopefully that wasn't enough to get us busted.
Bring us back in for the second hour right here, Civilization Cycle. Ransom Godwin bringing us in hour number 2. I was rambling into the break. I do that sometimes if I get on a tangent about something. China's about to find itself in a very difficult position. I don't know, Ransom, if you agree with that. Like, you know, what do you think they are going to do when their manufacturing ceases. And Revolution Radio, thank you for letting us talk about these ideas here. And, if you value free speech, which is not allowed in China, but it is here in the United States, still for a moment, so consider supporting Revolution Radio. Revolution.radio on your dial there. Many ways to support right up the donate tab. Something for everybody. So Ransom, I was wondering what you thought about, if it does go to that where manufacturing pretty much that's their largest market is America. So it just stopped as of today, and there's no more product coming. And I've seen a million stories of people returning shipments because they can't spend the $3,000 on tax on a $2,700 product. They got to spend $3,000 on import tax. They're like, send it back. So a lot of small businesses are already getting hit. Things are rolling back to China. They're not even going to send them out here anymore. There's a ton of suppliers calling their American customers, going, "We're not sending it." So now we're pretty much have been cut off. So the firewall across the ocean's for real. So how does China handle it is more my question.
I think they're going to have to relax their society if, because I just don't really see what they're going to do. They don't make certain things the right way. And the truth is most of the stuff they sell is stolen intellectual property in the first place. So if we start this new trade war, Cold War, whatever you want to call it, a new one, say it doesn't just go, right into war, despite us seeing, Chinese troops popping up in Ukraine, which kind of shows you that those two countries are tied together. So maybe they'll try to victimize Russia with all their trinkets. I know one thing: they're not going to compete in the car market, not with any country. I've been following a couple of Chinese channels, and I'm not even going to say their names because the way the internet works, they could get in trouble somehow just from you pointing it out. That are just talking about the differences in products, like. They sell a lot of the same things there, but it's their version of it. Like electric cars, for example. We over here get to see a lot of crashes, like with Tesla and stuff, and the people are usually okay, despite their car being totaled. Over there, a lot of people are burning alive. A lot of people are burning alive. They're being trapped in their cars. Their cars are driving into things. So... one of these are not the same. So that kind of shows you, to me, what might happen in a military frame of mind when they start putting out products that just don't compete with the products they're facing. They have a lot of manpower. There's no doubt about that. They have a lot of economic sway, but I just don't see them making new friends and influencing people to buy the junk that we're buying. It's unnecessary. It's trinkets. And I hate to say that, but they're going to have to reinvent themselves or go to war. There's really only two choices for them. And whenever you look at the societal problems that they have, management might decide war's the best path. Because they can just solve problems despite losing conflicts, if that makes sense. They can get rid of, expel lots of their population before they have to worry about having problems that way. And if their economics is going to shrink, that might be also an answer to that problem too. Because, they have to pay for that military. They have to, compensate in some way. I know it's not like over here where you get paycheck and stuff. I think things are going to get really nasty in China, and maybe, just maybe, everything will go right and they might convert to our system, but I don't think so. Matter of fact, I know that there's a lot of people upset in the Western world because we didn't convert to the Chinese system. As you know, like people like Kissinger and different people like that have long said that they wanted the world government to function in the Chinese communist / capitalist type of system. And what that is a bunch of people picking winners and losers, and the winners are always themselves, and they're always their friends or whatever. And we started seeing that here, and now we've caught on to the fact that some of the best paid jobs in America are politicians. I mean, that's the job. You go there with little wealth, you leave as, a multi-millionaire, if not a billionaire. And they can't explain how that happened. Although it's pretty obvious what happened. They knew the know-how of how the markets were working and which winners and which losers that they were going to influence. And, now we're kind of seeing that. And while you were talking a minute ago, I was showing this article that was kind of pointing out what I was saying, is that AI is a major player in what's happening in the market. Now, the question is who specifically runs what AI in the stock markets or the markets of the world? And I don't know the answer to that. However, I do know that the singularity of AI powered business versus, the intellect of a smart entrepreneur or trader, somebody that does it themselves, is the gap between those is closing. It's going to be where it's impossible to compete with companies that have computers that can analyze every angle on a market. And then on top of that, they know the trends that are coming from the people that are in charge, so they can input that into the AI, so the AI knows exactly when, where, and how to purchase and acquire wealth that's disappearing from humans, which, that all leads to the same idea, no matter how you look at it. Not just China, but the Western world and other places have to get rid of or pacify large portions of the population long enough for them to implement the physical robotic side of their new infrastructure. And it is coming. I see it. Simple jobs are being replaced. Everything that we do now is just about interacting with AI and robotics. And I was going to go through if you want to respond to that.
Then, what do you think the distraction would be as we come along? Now, a financial collapse, excuses for agriculture failing because of, the trade war and that sort of thing. But, the incrementalism of it can't be incremental because it's going to have to be a rapid implementation. So do you take away everything from everybody and then offer them some sort of, carrot and stick kind of thing, like we'll get back on track if you all go back and work on the robots here? Or, they promised that's the thing. They kind of blew their cover there on the COVID, because they kept telling everybody we're going to go back to normal, and dude, there is nothing normal at all, 0% normal of anything going back to anything. Like, that promise was never kept, and that people just saw right through that. You're looking at the world of 2018 compared to now. Are you kidding? We never went remotely back to anything close to normal.
No,
so now financial collapse, and we'll get back to normal again if we just work for the robots. Like, that's not going to fly this time. Fool me once, man.
Right. No, they totally shut down that whole world that we lived in. And this is a shadow of it. And now we're demonstrating that we're redesigning the system. I mean, it all does happen fast. The question is how are we going to end out the decade? And I want to throw a left turn at you. I was going to show some articles, just random articles about stuff. Here's the first one. If I can put it on screen there. Yeah. Robot rogue traders could rule the world and make bankers even richer or even, obsolete, in my opinion.
Because that's already BlackRock and Aladdin's protocol and algorithm run through there. They're describing BlackRock and Aladdin right there already.
Right.
It's a world's wealth harvesting algorithm.
And this is just one angle of business. And, here's some other ones that they're going to keep throwing at you, is these food prices. Right now, I went to the store and it wasn't actually that bad, or maybe it was just when we shopped or whatever. But they're predicting that. And then you see all this stuff about finally turning on some of the markets like Franken chickens and all of this. And then every headline here has the stock just, they're trying to terrify people with this idea because they know that the general population doesn't even understand what they're looking at. So like the average Joe could look at this and go, okay, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, it's red. Oh, red means bad. There's a minus, it's 39,000, whatever. They have no context. They haven't been following it. They don't actually pay attention. All they see is these articles. Dow tumbles 1,000 points. Stock market worse since, 2020. And it goes on and on and on. And then here's me throwing you into left field. If I can find the article. You know that a few weeks ago we were talking about the asteroid that increased for the first time that much up to 3%, and then it went back down about hitting Earth. If I can find it here, I'll turn that off till I do.
Well, there's a new comet coming through that's supposed to be visible to the naked eye here, coming at the end of May, I believe. There's
one up right now. It's up right now in the southern sky at sunrise. It'll be here till the 13th. But what I'm talking about is an asteroid they were calling it the City Killer. And I'll find the article while you respond to all these stupid stock market headlines, because it's like a fear thing they're putting in effect. And then what you asked is, what do you think the trigger will? It'll be a lot of things. They're sophisticated enough now to throw you like multiple triggers at the same time, knowing damn well that the public can't keep track. They can't keep up. They don't know the gravity of the things that happened until 5 to 10 years later when they finally figure it out. No, this is a silly idea. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but that asteroid that they increased the odds on, I showed the article last week. They now say it's going to hit the moon. And, we talk a lot about instant change on the Earth, like on a global scale. What is it? Volcanoes. Did an asteroid hit us? The magnetic field, the sun burps up. I mean, on and on and on and on. Natural triggers that would set society back. But what about this idea? What if something big, not this one specifically, but something bigger, smacked the moon with enough force to put debris that would fall into the Earth's atmosphere? And I'm not really talking about the effects of big chunks, hitting a spot, but the overall dust and debris that's in between us and the sun. And it would be an impact that didn't actually hit Earth. It just hit the moon. And then we have all this dust and debris limiting the amount of light on Earth. And this is something that could just happen at any time. And by the way, with that new comet, it's yet another comet in a long line. Matter of fact, all of them, that's not water. It's not ice, because they've never found one of those. But even though the model is that they're all, these chunks of ice and rock and they're full of water and all that, but they've never found one. So we just know these are electrically charged rocks, and we've paid attention. Some of these just fly right into the sun, and then somewhere on Earth has a giant earthquake right after that, almost every time, even though they don't admit the connection there and the causation. But back to what I was saying. So this
let me say that's why SDO always rips those frames out. When you're trying to look at a sun diving comet, SDO and Soho routinely removes those frames out. Like there'll be a huge skip of a 8-hour section that totally disappears out of the framing, and that is so common. It's just like the USGS downgrading earthquakes on the Richter scale. Always downgrading quakes. Always removing slides out of those sun diving comets.
Yeah, so kind of my point was, it's like they don't give people real fears of things that could happen. So rising asteroid that briefly threatened Earth will hit the moon. Now it's a city-sized thing, so like a city killer, they were saying that. So we could probably look up with some binoculars if we know right when it's going to hit and see a little light flash or something. But if you could imagine something bigger, and I've never, not once, ever heard of them talking about what are not just the odds of something hitting Earth. We talk about that, but what about hitting the moon, putting big dust debris up? Like that would be unexplainable from a person living on Earth without satellites and technological knowledge of of stuff like this. And then I point this out every time. Every single one of these that they track, this one's 2024 YR4, but the vast majority of them have passed Earth before they discovered it. Meaning they have no idea probably 95% of the objects that are flying around us until they just happen to see it reflect the right way off the sun and get some kind of videography from the satellites and telescopes to even know it exists. And most of those have already passed the Earth, past the point of, any perceived damage that it might give Earth. It's too late by the time they discover it. So the odds are, if something did hit us, it's going to be a complete punch in the gut. We won't expect it. It'll be a overnight change of reality. And that's just on the natural phenomenon. And then you look through the news, and it just seems silly. People, are
Hey,
wanting
Ransom,
to
could I
freeze
stop you here?
themselves.
We got some super chats coming in here, so I wanted to say. So H Johnson 8225, let's get a little woo woo tonight. Bring it. So we're gonna bring some woo on here in a second. And William Hooper bought us 5 double espressos. Thank you so much. Keep being a light in the darkness, guys. Hard years are coming. Well, for some, unless you're able to weave around and bend and find that opportunity in the danger, and then it will not be. It'll be a bountiful period. Like during the Great Depression, there were more millionaires made during the Great Depression than there were any time previously in history. I don't know if anybody knows that fact, but there were more millionaires created during that time, solving problems of that time. That created such vast wealth for those who could provide solutions. That's something to think about too. They never really they always want to make you scared. Depression. Well, there was a lot of wealth created in ingenuity and invention at that time too. So Porch Monkey bought a double espresso. Thanks. Question way back in the day when you were talking about Star Forts, David. That's me. You mentioned that there was one located in Alberta, and I cannot seem to track this bad boy down. Any way you could help me out? It was in Maritimes of Canada, and I'd have to get back to the exact thing with you. If you're going down Maritimes, and it was right on the very edge, one of the last settlements that was out, and it's a national park now, and you can actually clearly see it on the peninsula. And it's in remotest remote land right now anyway today. And you're telling me back like 200 years ago, that was like, they took the time and energy to build an entire Starfort complex. Dude, I am talking at the edge of nowhere, still to today, even with all the vast trade routes that have been set up and locks and dams and ports and rare routes and towns. And it is still in the middle of nowhere. That was not for that time. It was way before that, but it's out on the peninsula in Newfoundland. Follow the coast around St. George, Georgetown, somewhere around there. I got to dig back in my memory bank. I got to go back in and find St. George Fort. I think it was something like that. Anyway, Ransom, just wanted to read out the super chats. We're going to get on the woo, but please continue with your article that you're showing there.
Well, here's a couple. That was about the object that's going to hit the moon, and I was just pointing out that there's real things to be scared of, but I could just go quick through the articles. Cremation, do I have that on? No, I don't.
Yeah, you got some grizzly camp, a grizzly bear camp in Mexico.
So this is going on. They're discovering these things. They're trying to downplay it. The
Polar
fact
bear
is
camp,
that a lot of people have gone missing over here with the back and forth of these mass migrations. And, there's no shortage of things to worry about that they hit you, and they're all real. So it kind of goes to what you were saying. What's the trigger? They pull like 20 triggers at once. Here's one: households urged to check jewelry.
Oh, wait a second. Yeah, hold on a second. That is a jewelry registry of your own volition. Do not register your jewelry for insurance because they'll know where to come and confiscate the gold, for Christ's sake.
Right. They want to know. And then you have just stuff literally falling out of the sky, which is pretty woo-woo itself because there's really no information about it. All the people on the ground just said, we heard a sonic boom, and then noticed this helicopter chopped in half falling to the ground. Right.
Yeah, but that was a full family, and that was the CEO of a company, and it just escapes me.
Well, I'm sure we'll figure it out. But doesn't it seem weird?
Yeah, but that
they-
was the CEO of a company. His entire family perished. It was
Right.
Siemens or something. It was CEO of Siemens Company, I believe.
Oh, technology.
That's a very large Fortune 500 company. Him and his wife and his whole family got wiped out in a helicopter crash. Now, for me, that seems a little bit kind of suspicious that the CEO of Siemens, and maybe I'm misquoting on the company there, but saw some stuff coming through earlier.
Yeah, that's a trip. But there was I don't know where it's at now, but so they're completely tracking everybody. So they know when you're scared, when you're panic buying, all of that stuff. Every little conversation you've had with your little robot at home. Guess what? They lied to you. Of course they listened. Of course they saved it, and now it's in the cloud. So all of that's there. But really, my point was just all through the thing, they're trying to scare people about eating, about everything. And then let's get to what seems to be really going on. And I'll just skip, probably 100 articles about something to be afraid of, war, cyber attacks. I mean, they just don't stop. And if I can find the damn slide.
Well, no, that's
again.
a good one you have there. EU bans US beef. Okay, so again, if we're talking regionalization, like all these, oh, you can't send your beef here anymore, but that was also chicken and seafood banned out of the EU
Right.
because of America, right? The tariffs. So what did that do? That suddenly sent a tidal wave of food back into America, like lowering the price for a minute. So if you're going to redistribute food, like all the soybeans too, 40, almost 50%, it was 46%, I believe, of soybeans grown in America were exported to China. So, in a few videos I was talking about this. Now that food source, those soybeans, are going to get redirected back to America. But of course, that's way too much for us. We're not going to eat that much soy. So what they could do, though, is then crop substitute into something more nutritious on more of an ancient grain side. Because where you can grow soybeans, you can grow other types of amaranth, spelt, millet, sorghum, these types of things. So imagine a massive crop substitution plan implemented, but without spooking anybody. Because if we can't sell all of our soy, then we're going to convert these fields for the American public, for the American populace. We're going to give you a healthy food source, and we're going to put all these new grains. We're going to set up all these new micro markets for Americans. I know they're retooling of the machinery, the seed sources, the harvesting equipment, the drying, the storage, et cetera, all needs to be retooled. Again, that's another thing that can help boost the economy. Offer these new sort of micro grain. So if we were going to put amaranth, all right, it's a few $1 million market here in America, I think under 20 million, but imagine if it came in and it turns into like $1 billion market. And again, spelt and these kind of farro, these other times of ancient grains, you hardly ever hear of them, but imagine if they become $1 billion businesses here because it's a crop substitution without all the genetic modification into it. So when we move forward with this, you got to provide the food without spooking the populace. This is the whole thing about this grand solar minimum talking about it. If the populace was to ever be aware of this, they would absolutely just lose the plot well before their actual food shortages arrive. Their minds would run away. Like next year, there's going to be more. We're going to be left. We're going to have food shortage. We're going to whatever, escape New York kind of thing at the end of it. So how would you implement that? That's a perfect plan, actually. When I'm looking at this, saying, it's absolutely the most perfect plan to not spook the populace, to remove a sort of viable food source, but not really. You can only turn so much biodiesel from soy, and people aren't just going to eat soy. So many negative health effects with that stuff. So imagine if we're going to turn our fields into some other crop. Like, how do you do that without raising a few eyebrows, if you will? If they were going to do that and there was not trade wars, and hey, we're going to substitute, 70% of all the soybean growing fields, we're going to turn that into other kind of grains that are grown. People who wake up, but what is going on? But now there's going to be no what's going on. Just like when the COVID, they printed half the world's money supply and nobody blinked an eye just because we had to have stimulus. We had to do this. So nobody even blinked. Nobody even looked. Nobody questioned. Nobody asked. Why'd you just print half the world's money that has ever been printed in human history? You just printed in the last 4 years. Like, what? Same thing. You got to switch out the crops, but you don't want to alert anybody. It has to seem almost like natural, right? This is a natural causation. Oh, those bad Chinese, they won't buy our stuff. Oh, well, let's just convert our lands over and grow different stuff. if I may, on that one. And again, the beef and the chicken, the seafood, that's just going to get all pushed back into America. Because think about the fishing fleets off of America that are going out, like the Gulf of Mexico, off the eastern seaboard, out in the Pacific. Normally, they bring that back in. They flash freeze. They do all the factory type of processing on board, get it back in, and then they would get that onto containers and then ship it out. Well, now all that fish and seafood staying in America. So think about the absolute way to drive down food costs for a minute is push all that what would have been exported back into the public here. And it's underway right now. So it's going to be, I'm wondering what the lag time is between all that getting rediverted back into our markets here, where they're going to have to sell it, and the type and the lag time for food prices to start going down.
I think it's already happening. I think they're redistributing that stuff here. And this is where it gets woo-woo for me right here. And I've tried to tie these things together.
Go woo, man. Go woo.
You got the Franken chickens, right? And you got the beef over safety concerns. Well, we don't care about that in the United States. All that banned stuff, we love it. We're acting like we do now, but then you have this thing where they want to keep you confused and dumbfounded. Not me or you specifically, but the general public. And then they scare them with all of these things. Look, fungus infections, bacterial infections, none of it can be fixed by traditional means. So we're going to have new technologies, new AI designed, genetically modified things to save us. And now, this beef, you might stick your nose up to it and you find out it's genetically modified in some way and it might have a little tainted stuff in it, but the other stuff is gone out of the supermarket. Are you telling me that the masses are going to not eat this rather than not be hungry? Well, of course they're not. And if you're worried about it, don't worry about it. You can just go to the artificial intelligence therapist. You have the doctors that work on your heart now. Now they have AI Jesus. We have an AI God. We have the shrink. Not only designs your medicine, but, it's a therapist too. And if you think that this isn't happening, look, here's one. AI-generated attorney outraged judge. Scalds man over a courtroom. He's not a real person. It was an AI lawyer. The judge thought he had some kind of power over the AI by telling him this or that. The AI is just programmed with whatever legal defense it has, right? So everything's going to be fake. And then compare this to this. This is an article that's talking about the first vehicles, which is right here 6 miles away from my house. The first vehicles, historically, probably not the first, but it's the first find that shows us using it. 22,000-year-old vehicles hiding beneath the sand. Late in the Pleistocene here, in the valley I live in that I'm talking about. They had giant everything, and, what was eating that? Dire wolf. Dire wolf was eating that. Now you see this in the news. Of course, this isn't a real dire wolf. It's a Franken wolf that they made out of real DNA. It's exactly the plot of Jurassic Park. Now they're doing it. Now, imagine something happens, and all of a sudden there's no food, but they do have a way to help you. You could, all this genetically modified stuff, people are going to eat it.
Ransom, could I throw
hungry.
something at you there with the dire wolves real quick?
Yeah.
Because they were named Romulus and Remus.
Right.
If you spell Romulus or if you spell Remus backward, what do you get? Sumer.
Well, not only that, Romulus and Remus represent the beginning of the Roman Empire. So the beginning of it, the actual...
Yeah, Solomur means
reset.
high priestess. If you spell that backwards, Remus is Solomur, that means high priestess as well. So you got Sumer and high priestess if you spell those words backwards. So H. Johnson going to the woo on you there. Wanted to leave it there.
Right. I'm going to get these down till I figure out where that article is. But my point is that there's a solution that's being given for every problem, from the food. And now, are you telling me that you wouldn't eat GMO corn, rice, soybean, whatever, if they told you They fixed it where it's not going to cause you any health problems. And there's just no other choice because everything else has gone extinct. But don't worry, we can save you because we can recreate all of the creatures that we need, from the chicken to the beef to the predators, to keep them in line out there. And weirdly, you notice they're not tinkering on different eras of animals, but they're tinkering with Ice Age animals every time.
I could hear you in my ear the whole time when I saw that dire wolf. All I could hear was go, rewilding Pleistocene Ice Age animals, rewilding of Pleistocene Ice Age animals. I couldn't get to sleep, man. You're like, rewilding Ice Age Pleistocene animals.
Well, I'm not going to say I told you so, but I did mention it. No,
about 100,000 times.
And there's this other article I was going to show you that kind of links that in. So you got the AI therapist. So any of these things that you're worried about, don't worry about it. Just like on all the old sci-fi movies, you could just go push the button, and the AI therapist can take care of you. And while you respond to all of my kind of harebrained idea there, it seems like they know we're going into an ice age. They know there's going to be a mass die-off of species. They know they can offer the solution to the problem because it's a problem solution, however you say that thing, I can't get it out. Problem reaction
solution, mescaline. Yes.
Exactly, that's the thing. And they have the answers, and they're going to slowly drip feed you and change you over. Look, oh, well, that's cool. That genetic modifying saved those people from that disease, and they created that cool wolf at the zoo, and they made that chicken that's going to be, on the shelf when the organic farm chicken is out of stock. It's just going to be there.
So will the peyote cactus still grow in cooler climates with this modification? I don't know if I'd want to do any like genetically modified peyote. That'd be kind of nasty, I think.
They would take the special out of it, whatever.
Yeah, just saying. If you're going to give me some prescription AI bot, if I can get my wish list here. We'll leave it. It's a PG. It's a family-friendly program. Family-friendly there, YouTube. Family-friendly advertiser program for you. But I wanted to come back to your point about something hitting into the moon and sending dust and debris or into the upper atmosphere, at least into the mesosphere. At that point, what we saw with the Hungatonga eruption when the water vapor went up into the mesosphere, all that extra detritus and water vapor up there created these ice crystals. Now, the ozone could get on these ice crystals and settle on there, and then there was a depletion of ozone because once it actually found a surface, it broke off and it wasn't an O3 anymore, and it became an O2, and that's just the way it worked. Things broke off. You got, different ions, and then you got the regular what you consider oxygen. So, and then it kind of drifted down through the regular atmosphere. But that chemical reaction occurring up, 80, 90,000 feet into the atmosphere, as long as there's a surface layer for that ozone to bind onto for a moment there, and that catalyst, boom, they just break apart. You no longer got ozone. So that's why originally when I was talking about that Hungatonga eruption, that the chemical reaction with all the ice surfaces up there, those ice nucleation surfaces from all the water vapor, was going to cause depletion in ozone. And sure enough, it got to the 5th lowest. It didn't get to the 1st lowest, but I thought it would. Got to the 5th lowest in terms of ozone and recorded, measurements of that time. I mean, in the 70s, it was the very lowest it ever was. But comparatively to that, it was repairing itself tremendously, and then Hungatonga comes along, and you got these ice crystal surfaces for the ozone to bind onto, and then whoosh, we got massive depletion. That never really made news headlines. You know why? Because they weren't trying to achieve an agenda of chlorofluorocarbons and scaring everybody about this, that, and the other with asbestos and this and leaded paint, that. And, that whole transition, too, in the 1970s was to get us away from a certain type of protective, a lot of lead paints and things. You got to wonder what kind of radio frequency that would definitely block these days. Was it truly kids eating chips of paint and getting like lead poisoning, or was it to get you away from using lead paint coated surfaces on certain buildings and structures so they wouldn't be penetrated by this sort of, microwave frequency that we have around us, otherwise known as radiation, everywhere around us? Lead paint, you go into lead boxes to avoid the radiation out of nuclear blasts anyway. Imagine covering a house or whatever exterior in lead paint. Like, you would definitely be blocking a lot of the RF signal. Like, that was well ahead of its time to get that out of everybody's clutches. Like, you can't even find lead paint anymore, even if you wanted to, I don't think.
Could I ask you, think about that now. That's a major conspiracy theory on the internet. That, do you know of any kids? Did you ever see any kids when you were growing up eating lead paint?
Never.
I mean, what
dude,
dumb
I was
kid?
of that generation. Nobody ever was like nibbled on the paint. I mean, maybe some glue once in a while.
Maybe a toddler, right? Maybe a toddler, but you would think if you saw it, you would clean it up and the baby wouldn't get that much of it. But there is a major conspiracy theory that the implementing of the wireless and the 5G networks and all of that stuff would have never been possible without us removing the lead paint. How many people were really, exposed via paint chips where they were sick? Now, I'm sure there's going to be some examples, but
it's a
I don't think it was a problem.
That's an old wives' tale.
The problem with that conspiracy theory is you would have to admit that they had a foresight to know that they would have technology that could look through walls and keep track of every little bit of gold, firearms, your position in the house, in a 3D spatial awareness controlled by AI in the next several decades. Was that too
they're always
woo-woo?
50
Because
years
that's
ahead, so
real.
Do the math, man. Do the math. If they're 50 years ahead, as many say, and there's a 100-year plan, and the technology is 50 years ahead on the 100-year plan. So do the math. Do 50 years minus today. That would take us to 19 what?
I don't know, man. I think they had foreknowledge of all of the technology.
1975, and that's exactly when they started removing all the paint and everything out of there, didn't they? So that exactly matches with a 50-year lag on technology.
Right, and
I don't understand the chlorofluorocarbons. Why couldn't we have chlorofluorocarbons still floating around, dude? I love the CFCs.
I was just thinking, though.
I love CO2. I guess I'm a lover of different chemicals.
People think about their brain and being scanned, and I've mentioned many times that if you took different technologies that are proven and out, then you would know if somebody somewhere behind the scenes put these technologies all together for one purpose. Like the machine that can, show a screen printout basically of the words that you're thinking in real time. There's a machine that could show an image that you're dreaming or thinking of. There's machines that can tell your physiological changes based on scanning you with infrared and X-ray and different things, microwave. They can do all of these things. So if you combine all of that and you realize there is a real three-dimensional spatial awareness that is possible with all of the technologies out, all of the smart everything and the Wi-Fi, all of it, and combine that with satellites, and then know that they have a complete, and here's this article that I'm talking about. Here's the first map of the human brain, mitochondria, in groundbreaking achievement. Basically, they see every single portion of the brain that lights up with electrical activity when you're thinking. So they have this completely mapped. They know how to manipulate it. And then at the same time, they're saying AI proves that fingerprints are not unique. That means you have to go over to the new biometric system, which goes into right here, this article, fake people taking the jobs. So lawyers, therapists, medical doctors, pharmacists, all those jobs are going to AI. And then you have a network that can literally scan you and manipulate you based on what's going on in your head, in your physiological system. They can read it and then put anything from propaganda, to making you go crazy. And then it ties in all these people that think that they're targeted individuals or that they had messages sent to them. And then you realize nowadays, well, that's all completely legit, factual science. That's very possible. And if there were any entities out there that wanted to combine these technologies to completely control the human domain, well, I'm saying it's possible and likely that it's already implemented.
We need an EMP, man. We need a solar coronal EMP to go just set us back a little bit. I know we'll go back. A lot of people won't make it. We'll get back to cavemen, but that might be a better idea than trying to walk through this menacing, consciousness that's trying to take over everybody that's human on the planet. Again, that movie, The Matrix, makes more sense to me the more things that are happening right now using the human as a battery source. And not in the traditional, like plug it into a machine and make it work, but using it as a harvestable creature that emits an energy field that something else feeds off of. I absolutely see it more and more daily as I'm walking around, or as I just see the world just becoming seemingly unhinged. I know the Schumann resonance is changing quite a bit. It's running at much higher regular background resonance than normal. I mean, that 8 hertz or whatever, that's long gone. That's baseline 20 now. So how does a human that's born into a different frequency field continue to operate in that? See, I kind of understood how those older people got really angry and agitated, like the world just wasn't right and wasn't feeling right, and they were always complaining. At least my grandparents were like, "Shit, something's wrong. These kids are, and the world changed too much. It's not like it was." Grandparents, they always do that. But I understand them now because the frequency field they were born into had changed over that. So if you're even talking about a great year in precession, you're talking about 1 degree of difference at every 72 years, that'd be 1 degree. So if it had shifted that much, that'd be very much like our magnetic North Pole shifting as well. So think about that magnetic frequency, that frequency field they were born into would have shifted. So by the time they're 90, they're a degree and something plus into that. Of course, they're going to start to feel different about it, like the world literally had changed frequency-wise for them. And I'm saying the same thing. It is sped up and it's speeding up far greater than anything probably in the last couple of thousand years in terms of the field changing so quickly. So even somebody who's 30 or 40 might feel like somebody who was 95 that the world had changed so much, because I am saying unequivocally, whatever's going on around out here is shifting, and you can feel and see like the shift. It'll shift really greatly, and then it'll ebb back in and sort of snap back in place for a minute. Then some days you'll feel it just go completely out where everybody's just seemingly bizarre, and then and it'll snap back in again. Like this, I really believe there's something behind the Schumann resonance, and especially whether it be if there was a CME at that day, or what type of, where we had the full moon or where we had new moon, Schumann resonance. So if you're combining all these different factors together, the phase of the moon, actually the middle moon calendar, the Schumann resonance itself, and depending on how that's going, then whatever the solar activity is on the KP index or some sort of arrival of a CME energetically, you smash all that together, and yeah, I could definitely, there's something different going on here right now. And that's why there's so much change happening too across the planet with the governments, the economy, the population. It's here. It all just dovetails together. It's a perfect match and a perfect time.
Well,
now take advantage of that. Find your niche.
Think about this. You noticed that we were talking about the generational changes there and different behaviors with them from the great generation, and then you got boomers and etc. You remember there was a whole generation of very functional, intelligent people that couldn't figure out digital, devices when the phones first started coming out. Before they were like a TV screen, you had to program grandma's VCR. But then you look at the elderly of today, which are younger generations than those people, and they're scrolling on the phone, they're using tablets, they're doing the whole thing. That was a complete changeover right there. And that one generation just couldn't seem to vibe over to the new tech, right? Because they were like a totally different species. Now, I'm wondering if this summer, this is going to be a dark summer. I don't know if you knew that or not, but because of the moon.
Dark, though. What do you mean?
Well,
dark
I
summer?
mean less light at nighttime. And the reason for that is all summer we're going to have faraway moons, tiny moons, right? Because of the orbit of the moon, it's in the cycle where it's going to be far away all summer long.
Aphelion is the proper name for that.
Right. And then we're going to have a super moon, September maybe, or October, I forget what it is, but it won't be till fall. And I wonder if there will be a noticeable difference in behavior compared to like last summer where we had super moons and all kinds of stuff like every other day. Or
super
month,
close in, huh?
Right. So now there's going to be a whole different frequency a different time period. So different news coming in, different revolutions, and people are going to go outside. Maybe they'll see the night sky better, like more of the stars and stuff, and it'll be less about the moon. And I wonder, not just the frequency, but just the light frequency and behavior frequency and all of these things. That's what they've been studying. And I really think that this pandemic that we had allowed certain people to collect certain data about human behavior. How far will they take things? What information will they believe without, kind of studying it themselves and finding out and making their own opinion? They also found out what it would be like for people to retreat and become, kind of eclectic with their behaviors because they have different informations coming in. And then they buffered us, right? They buffered us. There was a 6 feet. You had to be away from everybody. You had to not, they even went so far as to insist that you don't make eye contact, which is a basic human, communication. Like I could go to Japan, not knowing any Japanese, not even being culturally set to their body language, and still me and a person that doesn't speak any English, has never been to the United States, we're going to be able to communicate. And part of that is through eye contact, right? There's something human, no matter who it is you're looking at, that you can look at their face and have some kind of communication. They tried to convince people that they wouldn't get as sick, or that they would be less likely to get sick if they didn't look at people. And that literally gets into that, double slot, whatever, mind over matter concept of how you can change reality by observing it. So they convinced a bunch of people, don't even observe each other, and then we wonder why we're seeing all these people acting like, they're off their meds, but unfortunately they're on their meds. They're saturated with crazy ideas coming from who? The media, billionaires, like all of it's coming from the top down. And you don't see much more of that. We barely ever see that grassroots fad or phenomenon that starts at the street level and becomes popular. It's all from the top. They have a complete brainwashing system. So that's why you see people that are, super pro Russia and Ukraine, and then you have the others super pro. Nobody stops to think about the situation from their own point of view. They only take authoritative sources. And then you have our group that's, just pouring through it, trying to find conflicting ideas to find the real truth out there. And I don't even think that we get much of that looking for it. And so you can imagine how much people get that are not looking for it. As they say, they're not awake. They're just not noticing stuff. Like I cannot watch a movie without referencing 20 other movies, seeing the social narrative they're trying to push in it, looking at all of the occult symbols they put in that mean things. The whole thing is ritualistic, but now they're transforming all of those formulas that they had from the old world over to a technological, center. So they have the technology doing all of that social engineering for them. And they're using incrementalism that they perfected, but now it's so convoluted. There's just so much fear and, things happen rapidly that I don't think the common person, for one, even thinks they should filter all of it and think about what's really happening. They just don't have the capability because they've slowly been pushed into that system. And now they're about to restart that system and increase the technology and increase all of those programs. So I can't even imagine what my poor grandchildren are going to have to deal with if this system lasts. But I don't think that's the point. They're getting all the beta testing, information, and data gathering now so that when they reset, it'll be a totally new functioning machine that they've created from the start up. And it's hard to argue they're not doing that. They've done that in the computer world, the biological world, and they're even claiming that they're going to do it to the weather system of the planet. So all of a sudden, I see us just having a event that dominoes into mass population reduction, and then these guys, these same groups, come out and say they have the answer for everything. Look, we stopped global warming. We're stopping famine. All you have to do is eat our products that we designed. So it's all set up for us. It's just, like you said, which trigger will they pick to convince people that it's all just unfolding randomly and it's just history and you're living through it?
All of them at the same time. You hit it on the head. Oh, by the way, NJ in Texas bought us 5 double espressos. Thank you very much. He just said thank you. They're going to use all of it, Ransom, in my opinion. See, it's like the full spectrum dominance of every single aspect. So food shortages might get some people, but those who've prepared and already stocked up, then the economy would get them, or some sort of war or shut off of goods and supplies coming over. Those who are in the prep mode, well, all of your stuff pretty much is stopped on a dime. Give it another less than a month, and stores are going to be cleaned out in America, man. If the tariffs are going on and then Amazon is stopped, if the tariffs just did it by itself and Home Depot couldn't get their stuff, okay, you could have still ordered from Amazon, right? But both those avenues are shutting and have shut. So now you got 3 things going on. And then if the war comes in, that'll be a 4th one. So everywhere you look across, there's going to be dominance, full spectrum, dominance of all these different events, all in play at the same time, overlaying on top of each other to try to affect as many people in unison, and those overlays and those intersecting types of demographics at the exact same time. Because if they do all those in unison, then there's nobody who can't. So then if the war starts, then there's a fuel shortage. If you didn't get your fuel, and then their generators run. So there's a million things that can dovetail into this. But at the end of it, what's it been? It's just, for me, it's about more control. It's the number one thing that has to be accomplished is the movement from the current monetary system into a new monetary system that's all digital. Now, how do you do that? You can't unless the entire old system evaporates. And when I say evaporates, I'm talking like that cover off of the Economist magazine where that new one is standing on the ashes of the old. Because right now, you said something earlier about, all these stock things are scaring people with. What they're really not going into is the institutional sell-off that's occurring. So if you go in levels of debt issuance, you got junk bonds and all these kind of things. And you come up, you got the corporate bond structure, and that's maybe semi-safe for a better term. And then you got the treasury bills, the T-bills. People are selling those off at massive amounts because they're getting calls all over the place, either losing money or whatever direction they were betting that has gone. Because you can't go with a 5% swing without wiping out a huge amount of people. These calls are coming in, these margin calls are hitting everybody everywhere. If they were long or if they were short, something whiplashes 10% that way, 10%. People are out long, people are out short. It doesn't matter. And they're getting wiped out both directions. And we're talking about institutions like $100 billion getting margin called in. What are they going to do? Well, nobody wants to buy the junk bonds because it's too junky and it's just incredibly scary out there. They're getting rid of their treasury bonds. There's this tidal wave of treasury bonds selling out into, they'll take anything. They'll take any amount to get it, to pay that, to cover the call. So they're even now fire sailing the most stable asset of these treasury bonds, but really is it gold's better. But this is where it comes down to, is there is a wholesale sell anything at any cost to cover your loss instead of completely wiping out to zero, sell anything at a loss to cover that. And that's where we sit today. Now, this is in the institutional side, and there's every single market. I don't care where it is and what continent, on what is that. It is all getting fire sailed at the moment right now. That's why that 1987, the 2008, and then the 2020 at the COVID are all, those were the last times that all this would have occurred. But what they're not talking about is the institutional selling to cover everything behind the scenes when you got something like 100 trillion in derivatives that are out there that are coming unwound. That's the big thing nobody's covering, is all the calls on these heavy, large institutions that they are not making it. And the further you trace that trail back there, and they're also getting called on margin, and everybody needs to sell. And then again, there's so many, there's not enough buyers for the amount of sellers. It's an inverse now. Everything is starting to go something very similar to what real estate did in 2008, but this time it's the bond market. Like normally, this is the safe area, but it's no longer safe. So keep your eye on the bond market is what I'm trying to say. When the margin calls are coming in heavy this week as well. Like this weekend, it's going to be, watch the crypto market do something. They need to pull the money out of there again too. So anyway, thanks for joining us. I rambled into the last of the hour again. I guess I'm an hour hog anyway. Ransom Godwin, thanks so much for joining me tonight. CivilizationCycle.com. Put your email in there. Show notes.